Today's the last day. We are on the last chapter of the Sisters Grimm. Oh, I can't wait to figure out what happens with Daphne, Sabrina, and Puck. They've just kind of been got lulled to the Pied Piper's melody. We know, kind of brainwashed and taken over there for a minute. I can't wait to see what happens underground in the tunnels with the Rumpelstiltskin. Will they blow a hole in the barrier of Fairyport Landing? Will we figure out what happens with Daphne and Sabrina's parents? We know that Prince Charming gave her those matches from the little match girl that can bring them anywhere. Ooh, I can't wait to tie up all the loose ends in our last chapter of the Sisters Grimm. Chapter 10. Sabrina, wake up, a voice shouted from far away. She tried very hard to pay attention to it, but she was exhausted and dizzy. Sabrina, you have to wake up, now! She slowly opened her eyes. Mr. Hamlin was standing over her, with a wild, desperate look on his face. What are you doing in my bedroom? She grumbled. Sabrina, we're under the school, Hamlin said, sounding frantic. I know it's hard, but try to concentrate. Sabrina looked around and saw she was standing in a huge tunnel where children were rushing back and forth with wheelbarrows full of dirt and rubble. She looked down at herself and saw she was covered in soot and holding a shovel. Do you understand what has happened to you? Hamlin asked. No, the girl replied. Her head felt so heavy she could barely keep it up. I entranced you and your friends, the principal explained. I had to. They have Wendell, and they'll kill him if I don't do what they want. Where's my sister? Shouted Sabrina demanded. They've gotten everyone. Your sister, your grandmother, Canis, Charming, the sheriff, Snow, Puck, and my son at the end of the tunnel. I managed to send you off in the mine to dig, and so far they haven't noticed. How long have I been down here? 6 hours. 6 hours? They could all be dead. This was the soonest I could get you, Hamlin said. They were watching me, but now that they've tunneled to the barrier, they don't seem to care that I've ran off. Oh, I wouldn't say we don't care, a voice from behind him said. Sabrina heard the sound of ripping flesh. Then Hamlin fell to the ground. The frog girl was behind him, holding a bloody knife. You're coming with me, she hissed, grabbing Sabrina roughly by the arm. Sabrina swung her shovel and hit the frog girl in the head, so hard the monster fell to the ground and moaned. Sabrina rushed to help Hamlin. Wendell, Hamlin said as blood pooled beneath him, you have to find him and get him out of here. I'll come back for you, Sabrina said, and then she ran into the nearest tunnel with her only weapon, the shovel, slung over her shoulder. She scrambled forward, stumbled on jagged rocks, and accidentally kicked over some abandoned tools. Dust filled her lungs, choking her and making it that much harder to concentrate on where she was going. Each step was a challenge to her balance, and unfortunately her path was complicated, twisting, turning maze. Every few yards she would spot a child she recognized from school. Each was glassy-eyed, staggering through the tunnels, hauling buckets of broken stones. None of them seemed to notice her, even when she stopped and begged for directions. They were still under the Piper's spell. At last she spotted a faint light in the distance. As she came closer to it, the tunnel widened dramatically, revealing an enormous room carved out of Fairyport Landing's bedrock. She paused at the mouth of the room, doing her best to calm her breathing and listen for any movement. Hearing nothing, she lifted the heavy shovel off her shoulder and entered, swinging the weapon in the air in case anyone was about to ambush her. But she was alone. Only a few old buckets and a couple of pickaxes littered the floor. There were no exits other than the way she'd come in, and the tunnel was a dead end. She raced back the other way, passing more of the zombie-faced, filth-covered kids. I should head in the direction they're coming, she realized. As she darted down the tunnel, fighting the crowds, at one point Natalie and the frog girl came lumbering down the tunnel after her, but Sabrina stepped out into the line of children and being as filthy as they were, went unseen by the monsters. The tunnels went on and on. Some led to massive rooms, while others narrowed so that there was hardly any room for the two children to stand side by side. But eventually she found what appeared to be the end of the dig. The room was high and wide and filled with boxes of dynamite and mining tools. Flickering torches illuminated the room, but there were still deep shadows along the walls that Sabrina could not see into. Anyone could be hiding in them. "I've come for my family," she shouted into the cave. Her voice echoed off the stone and bounced around her ears. An odd clicking and hissing sound followed, then a disturbing laugh. Suddenly, something hit Sabrina squarely in the back. Unable to keep her footing, she stumbled over a sharp rock and fell hard onto her shoulder. Searing pain swam through her veins, followed by a dull, throbbing numbness. She tried to scramble to her feet, but her arm hung loosely at her side. It was broken. She cried out in frustration and pain. Using her good arm, she picked up her shovel, swung it around, doing her best to make it seem as if she had not been seriously injured. She walked in small circles, scanning the room for the huge spider, but everything was so dark. "I'm not going to be easy to kill," she threatened, hoping her voice sounded more confident to the monster than it did in her own ears. "Kill you? Don't you understand? This is a party," the voice replied, "and you're the guest of honor." You guys remember this? This is that very first opening scene at the beginning of the book. We've kind of made it full circle, and kind of a circular plot almost swinging back there. Guest of honor. A long, spindly leg struck out from the shadows, narrowly missing her head. It slammed against the wall behind her, pulverizing stone into dust. Sabrina swung wildly at the hairy leg, sinking the shovel's sharp edge into the monster's flesh. The spider shrieked in agony. Its pain echoed through the cavern. In the dim light, she could see its grotesque body flailing, then watched it fall to the ground. It knocked a torch off the wall, which bounced at her feet, illuminating the ceiling above her. There, suspended in mounds of thick, horrible webbing, were her family and friends. Daphne, Granny Relda, Puck, Mr. Canis, Snow White, Sheriff Hampstead, and Mayor Charming hung above, with only their heads free of the sticky threads. Their mouths were covered as well, but Sabrina could hear Daphne's choked cries and Hampstead's angry groans. They were still alive. The monster limped to its feet and then slowly ascended the wall of the cavern until it was hanging upside down from the ceiling. Finally, Sabrina could see how gigantic it was, and more importantly, that it wasn't simply a giant spider. Its lower body was spider-like, but its upper body had the chest and head and arms of a boy. Even with two huge pincers that jutted from his mouth and clicked excitedly, she recognized him as the annoying boy from her homeroom. It was Toby. Surprised? Toby laughed. "Not really," Sabrina taunted. "The bad guy is usually the ugly, giggling idiot." "I've got a surprise for you," a voice said from behind her. Sabrina spun around and found Natalie standing there. Sabrina noticed her front tooth was now missing. Then someone else stepped out of the shadows, someone who made Sabrina's heart ache. It was her only potential friend in the entire school, Bella. The blonde girl put her arm around Natalie's shoulders and smirked. "You're one of them?" Sabrina asked sadly. Suddenly, the girl jumped into the air, higher than any human being could possibly leap. Even more startling, Bella's hands and feet stuck to the roof of the cave, and her body started to change. Her skin looked as if it was filling with water. Dark spots rose to the surface on her hands and legs. Her eyes bulged out to disgusting proportions and moved to the top of her head. Her shoes exploded off her feet, revealing long green webbed toes. Within seconds, she had transformed into the frog girl that had attacked the Grimms. Like a streak of lightning, a long, slippery tongue shot out of her mouth, latched onto Sabrina's shovel, and yanked it out of her hand. Why did you pretend to be my friend? Duh, I'm evil, Bella said. The three mutated children burst into laughter. No, you're not, Sabrina replied. You're being manipulated by Rumpelstiltskin. He's toying with your emotions and making you do this terrible stuff. Like killing Mr. Grumpner? Toby asked. And Charlie, Bella said, patting Natalie on the back. They just kept getting away of our father's plans, Natalie said as she transformed into the hairy animal she truly was. Your father? Is that what you call him? Sabrina said. He's insane, and when he cracks a hole in the barrier, these tunnels will flood and kill everyone in them. All the kids will die, including you. Actually, the children are already outside trying to figure out what happened to them, a new voice said. Mr. Sheepshank emerged from the shadows. Mr. Sheepshank, Sabrina cried, you have to get out of here. They're going to blow this place sky high. Wow, Sabrina, Toby the spider clicked. You're even dumber than you seem in class. Hush, Toby, the counselor said. And then he turned to Sabrina just as he began to morph and bubble. Unlike the others, Sheepshank didn't get bigger. In fact, he got a lot smaller when his transformation was complete. He was hardly 3 feet high. His head, back, and arms were covered in kinky brown hair, but his face and pointed ears were pink like a pig's. He had a short, stubby tail, hoofed feet, and a couple rows of razor-sharp teeth. You're Rumpelstiltskin, she gasped. No fair. You guessed my name. Someone must have told you, the little monster said sarcastically. Really, child, I must agree with my son. You aren't as bright as your school records suggest. No matter, I have many names, and you are bound to guess one of them eventually. Just for the record, the one I like best is Daddy. Sheepshank extended his arms, and Natalie, Bella, and Toby rushed to stand by his side. Daddy? Daddies aren't sick perverts who steal children, Sabrina shouted. I don't steal children, Sabrina, the little creature said as if he was genuinely insulted. I care for them. These children have been treated with nothing but love and affection. I give them everything they've ever wanted. Then what do you get out of it? Sabrina asked. Why, I get their love and their joy and their sadness and their frustration and their hope. And most of all, I get their anger, Rumpelstiltskin cackled. I get their feelings, child. Every last delicious morsel of them. Their emotions are so raw and uncontrolled. You don't understand, do you? Let me spell it out for you. I feed on their feelings. That's where you get your power, Sabrina gasped, as Mr. Sheepshank's advice about feelings came flooding back to her. Of course he would encourage her to express her anger. He was eating it. You're starting to get it, Miss Grimm. Children keep me alive. As people get older, they find ways to control their feelings, but not children. Children are like emotional, all-you-can-eat buffets. So where's a guy with taste like mine going to find work? Why, Fairport Landing Elementary, of course. And trust me, Sabrina, it has been decadent. For years, I have sat back and feasted on it, on the fights and humiliations you kids pile onto one another, the senseless bullying, the embarrassment of being picked last for baseball, the endless teasing about someone's hair or clothes. When it comes to being mean, kids are like master chefs, and I have enjoyed every bite. But there's a great big world of anger, war, and pain for me to feast out there. So when the Pied Piper came to me with a plan to blow a hole in the barrier from below, I signed on. It wasn't easy, though. The Piper used his magic music, and every night the children of the school came to dig out the tunnels. At first, we tried to use all the kids, but the little ones are so weak. We had to make do with fifth and sixth graders. Unfortunately, there was another unforeseen problem. The next morning, those same kids, the ones who supplied me with the most energy, were too sleepy to argue with one another. They went from a raging river of emotions to a dripping faucet overnight. I feared I wouldn't have the energy to do my part when we reached the barrier. But then you walked through the door. What do I have to do with it? Sabrina asked, doing her best to buy time until she could come up with a plan. Sabrina, you're like the Niagara Falls of anger. It just keeps pouring over the edges. Every time you lost your temper, it was like a four-course meal with all the fixings. All the paranoia and prejudice that runs through you, all of the self-doubt, and of course the indignant rage about what has happened to you in your short life. Well, it was delicious, Rumpelstiltskin said, as blue electricity crackled out of his fingertips. Once I tapped into it, I turned up the volume on you and you could barely keep up with the emotional energy, he continued. Truth be told, we probably didn't have to kill Grumpner or the janitor, but I could sense how outraged you'd get, and it worked. Thanks to you, I finally have what it takes to blast a hole in the barrier. Once it's open, I'll be free, and the Scarlet Hand will march across the world, destroying anyone who gets in their way. So you're the Scarlet Hand, Sabrina said, now feeling anger rise within her. You took my parents. The Scarlet Hand isn't a person, child. It's a movement, an idea. It's bigger than all of us, and I am just one spoke in a very big wheel. Oh, I can feel your rage growing, Sabrina. Where's my son? Principal Hamlin shouted as he charged into the cave. Surprised, Rumpelstiltskin shrieked and moved to safety behind Natalie's hulking body. The principal looked exhausted, beaten, and on the edge of madness. His shirt was covered with blood, and he limped painfully. In his hands were his bagpipes. Tell me where my boy is, or I will play a song that will tear you apart. Wendell got in the way, the tiny monster cried, gnashing his teeth at his much taller partner. I warned you about keeping him under control. He pointed to the ceiling. High on the cave wall, away from the others, was a mound of webbing from which no head poked and no movement came at all. Sorry, guys. Hamlin fell to his knees and buried his head in his hands. I've been a fool. Bring him down, Toby. Bring him down, Toby, Rumpelstiltskin said. Aw, Dad, he was almost ready to eat, the spider boy whined. Go on, son, Rumpelstiltskin said. Reluctantly, Toby scaled the wall, cut the web loose with his razor-sharp legs, and carried the boy gingerly to the ground. He set Wendell down at Hamlin's feet and scurried back to his father. Hamlin tore the rest of the threads off his son. When the boy was finally free, he leaned down to listen for breathing. Natalie rushed to the corner of the room and returned with a paint can. She dipped her hand inside it, and when she pulled it out, it was covered in red. Should I place the mark on the kid's body? Hamlin shook with fury. Stay away from him. All of you, just stay away. You and your Scarlet Hand killing innocents. This wasn't part of our plan, troll. I just want out of this town so I could give my son a normal life. If we'd done it your way, we'd never have gotten this far. You'd never have the backbone to do what needs to be done, Piper, the little creature said. Someone had to make the hard decisions. Like killing my boy, Hamlin said. I know your pain, Rumpelstiltskin said. If I were to lose one of my children, I would be heartbroken too. But sacrifices have to be made to please the master. The who? Sabrina cried, but no one answered her. Hamlin set his boy down gingerly and climbed to his feet. He took his bagpipes and filled them with air. I'm putting a stop to this right now, he said. But before he could blow a single note, Bella leaped across the room, shot out her sticky tongue, and wrapped it around the bagpipes. She yanked the instrument out of the piper's hands and into her mouth, swallowing it whole. "That's Daddy's little girl," Rumpelstiltskin cheered. The monster stalked Hamlin, backing him to a corner. Sabrina wanted to rush to his side, but Toby blocked her path. "Without your pipes, you are nothing, Hamlin," Rumpelstiltskin said. "And now that the barrier has been reached, your usefulness has expired." "Leave him alone," Sabrina demanded, but the monsters ignored her. The Pied Piper was about to die, and there was nothing she could do to fight the monsters off. But there was still something they didn't know. "You're not his kid," Sabrina shouted. "He played on the fears of your real parents. He made them feel hopeless, like they couldn't take care of you, because that's what he does. He plays with a person's feelings to make them do things they wouldn't normally do. He did it to me. I've said terrible things since I met him, things I don't truly feel or believe. He's done it to you your whole lives. But you can stop him right now. Your real parents have been looking for you ever since he took you from them. They want you back." Toby looked confused. "Is that true?" The Spider Boy clicked. "You said my parents abandoned me in a park because I was a monster." "They did, son," Rumpelstiltskin said. "He's lying," Sabrina cried. "I've talked to your parents myself. They didn't leave you in any park. Rumpelstiltskin manipulated your moms and dads and then paid them millions of dollars for you. He bought you, Toby, for the same reason that he bought Natalie and Bella, so he could feed on you. You're not his kids. You're his snacks." "She is lying, children," Rumpelstiltskin said. "People are always lying around me. They want to take you away from me. It's not fair, children. Something has to be done to stop the people who hate me." "We believe you, Dad," Bella said, her green face boiling with rage. "Can we kill her now?" asked Natalie as she looked at Sabrina with murderous eyes. Rumpelstiltskin grinned. "How could Daddy resist his little angels? Go have your fun." "No!" Hamlin shouted. "This is going to stop now. I don't need my pipes to stop you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something shiny, then looked down at it lovingly. It was Wendell's harmonica. He raised it to his lips and blew a low, sorrowful note. Suddenly a huge fissure opened in the ground. At first, nothing but a stream belched out of it, but it was followed by a flood of ants, worms, roaches, centipedes, and a million other creepy-crawly things. They attacked Rumpelstiltskin and his children. The frog girl leaped into the ceiling to try to get away, but it was immediately overcome by a swarm of flying cockroaches. Losing her balance, she fell painfully to the ground. Natalie was quickly overrun with centipedes that wiggled and raced along her body, biting her fiercely. The monster girl growled and whined, but she soon fell to her knees, unable to fight. Toby scurried around the cave, spraying webs at the sea of worms that poured over him, but the tide of insects was too much for him, and he was engulfed. Rumpelstiltskin didn't fare much better. Leeches covered the little man, and he fell over in agony. "Mr. Hamlin, please help me get to the ceiling," Sabrina said, grabbing her shovel. Hamlin blew into the harmonica again, and a rolling wave of spiders, maggots, and beetles lifted Sabrina high off the ground. Granny Relda was hanging closest, so Sabrina used her good arm to pull the cobwebs from the old woman's mouth and hands. "Oh, Liebling," Granny said, "this is the one time I'm so glad you didn't listen to my rules." Sabrina smiled as she clumsily used her shovel to cut the sack of webs from the wall. The wave of bugs expanded to hold the old woman up, and she wrestled her way out of the sticky cocoon. When she was free, she reached into her handbag, took out a pair of scissors, and put them onto Sabrina's good hand. "These will make things a lot easier." Sabrina rode the tide of creepy crawlies to the next person, who happened to be Daphne. She yanked and pulled until the little girl was free, using the scissors to cut her off the wall. Daphne was in tears, but she threw her arms around her older sister. The hug hurt Sabrina's injured arm, but she bit her lip, and hugged back as fiercely as she could. It was then that Sabrina noticed Rumpelstiltskin was emitting a blue energy that swirled around him. A fireball blasted out of his chest, sending a huge explosion ripping through the cave, incinerating the entire insect army. The wave of bugs that supported Sabrina and Daphne and Granny turned to ash, and the trio tumbled to the ground, jarring Sabrina's broken arm so painfully that the agony nearly knocked her unconscious. Through the haze of pain, she saw that the blast had damaged the foundation of the cave, and that large chunks had begun to fall from the ceiling. "Look what you have done!" Rumpelstiltskin shrieked. He lunged at the principal and knocked him down. In the struggle, Hamelin's harmonica slipped from his hand and slid across the cave floor, where it was crushed by a falling boulder. "Girls, we have to find a way to get the others down," Granny said. "I have an idea," Daphne replied, snatching the scissors from her sister and shoving them in her pocket. She rushed over to the unconscious frog girl, kneeled down, rubbed her hands all over the beast's super sticky skin. Then she rubbed her sneakers on until they were covered in the goo. She ran into the wall, pressed her hands against the stone, and slowly but effortlessly climbed the wall. Each step made a squishy slurp. "Liebling, do be careful," Granny cried. That is so punk rock," Sabrina shouted. When the little girl got to where Puck was trapped, she used the scissors to cut him free. Indignant as ever, he sprouted his wings and fluttered around the room. "Someone's gonna pay for this," he promised. Meanwhile, Daphne went to work on Snow White, and then Mayor Charming, and then Sheriff Hampstead, and finally crawled along the ceiling to the last of their group, Mr. Canis. But before she could cut away a single strand, she slipped and fell. Puck caught her just before she hit the ground. "I ran out of sticky stuff," Daphne said. In the meantime, Hamlin and Rumpelstiltskin were fighting ferociously, trading punches and kicks backed by hatred and rage. Hamlin picked up the tiny creature and threw him violently against a wall, where he slumped to the ground and lay still. Hamlin stalked over to him, snatched an axe off the ground, and holding it high over his head, prepared to kill the creature that had taken his son's life. "Piper, no," Granny shouted. I can't let him live. He killed Wendell," Hamlin cried. "No, he didn't," Miss White said. She was crouched over Wendell, holding her wrist in his hand. "He's got a pulse." Hamlin dropped the axe and ran to his son's side. "What do we do?" Snow White laid Wendell flat on his back and tilted his head up. She peered into his mouth and then reached in and pulled something out with her fingers. "He had some of the cobwebs in his throat," the teacher said. "He couldn't get any air." She took a deep breath and blew down the boy's throat. She tried 3 more times. Sorry, guys. Shouting for Wendell to wake up until he finally shuddered and coughed. He was alive. Hamlin stroked and kissed Wendell on the forehead. "Dad," the boy said, "I think I solved the mystery." Hamlin laughed and sobbed at the same time. "I know you did, son. You're a great detective." Thank you for saving my son," the principal cried. He reached over and gave Snow White a huge kiss on the mouth. Charming was standing nearby and raised his eyebrows at Snow White as Snow White blushed. Then he scowled. Rumpelstiltskin staggered to his feet. He looked at his fallen children and sneered with disgust. "It's over," Sabrina said. "Oh, it's far from over," Rumpelstiltskin said. "All I need is a little more power, and there's someone in this room who can give me enough to blow this little town off the map." Sabrina had never been afraid of anything as she was of this little man. He knew her anger. He feasted on it, and she provided him with enough raw energy to destroy them all. But she wasn't going to let him play with her head any longer. "You can't do it," she said. "I'm not angry anymore." "I'm not talking about you, child. I'm talking about the wolf." Sabrina gazed up at the skinny old man, still trapped in the web prison. Even from such a distance, she could see the fear in Mr. Canis's eyes. It was the first time she had ever seen the old man afraid of anything. It seemed to unsettle Charming as well, because the prince stepped in front of Rumpelstiltskin with fists clenched. "We're trapped down here, troll," Charming said. "If you pull that stupid trick of yours on the wolf, you'll let him out, and he'll kill us all." "No, my friend, he will save us all," Rumpelstiltskin said. "The wolf will bring the barrier down, freeing us from this prison, freeing himself from his own prison as well. Look at him, trapped inside Canis, parading around like he's human. It's pathetic. It's disgusting. We're ever afters. We shouldn't be acting like humans. We should be ruling over them. The wolf will be thrilled to help. His rage will open the barrier, and the Scarlet Hand will take this world for its own." Mr. Canis struggled, but the change had already taken hold. The webs ripped as the old man's body tripled inside. A hideous roar echoed from the crumbling walls, and the wolf was free. He fell to the ground, sending a shockwave through the floor as he landed on his feet. He looked around at the desperate group and licked his lips. "Guess who's back?" he snarled as he struck Charming, throwing him against the wall. He sniffed the air. "Something smells good." Puck's wings sprang from his back, and he stepped in front of the wolf. He drew his wooden sword and jammed it into the beast's belly. "You take another step or try to harm anyone here, and you will have to answer to me," he said. The wolf studied the boy for a long time, and then a chuckle came up his throat. "Trickster," he said, sniffing the boy. "You have the disgusting smell of love on you. It will be your end." "I didn't know dogs spoke in riddles." The wolf turned and eyed Sabrina. He chuckled again and then turned his eyes back to the boy. "All right, lover boy, I'm going to make you famous," the wolf growled. The boy spun around on his feet and immediately transformed into an elephant. Oh my goodness, sorry guys. He snatched the wolf up in his long trunk and smashed him against the wall. The wolf fell to the floor stunned. "Fantastic!" Rumpelstiltskin cried. A glimmer of blue energy began to swirl around him. "Puck, stop!" Sabrina cried out, but Puck was too caught up in the fight. He couldn't know he was actually helping Rumpelstiltskin stoke the wolf's rage. "Stay down, dog!" the boy shouted as he transformed back into his normal self. He smacked the wolf on the head with his sword and laughed. "Or there'll be no table scraps for you." "You're a funny boy." The wolf sprang to his feet so quickly that Puck nearly fell backward. The boy's wings erupted from his back, and he flew into the air, hovering at the top of the cave. The wolf leaped high, grabbing the boy with his claws, missing him by inches. Puck laughed and struck the beast's paws with his sword. If it hurt, the wolf didn't seem to mind. His face was a combination of anger and amusement. Puck darted out of his grasp over and over until his wings clipped the ceiling and he fell to the ground. The beast lunged at the boy, grabbing his huge claws, and opened his jaws wide. His fangs glistened in the tunnel light. Suddenly, Daphne was standing in front of him. "Stop it right now," she demanded. The wolf turned to look at the little girl. A blast of hot air blew out of his nostrils into her face. "Don't worry, child. You'll get your turn to fight for your life." "Daphne," Granny Relda called, but the little girl ignored her. "Leave Puck alone," Daphne said, "and let me talk to Mr. Canis." The wolf snarled. "Child, Mr. Canis is not real. There is only me." "That's a lie," the little girl cried. If she was afraid, Sabrina couldn't see it. "Mr. Canis is real. He's part of my family, and I love him." Briefly, the wolf's face changed. For a flickering moment, Sabrina saw his steel blue eyes change to Mr. Canis's dull gray one. The old man was inside, trying to control himself. "Child, you must run," the wolf said quietly, dropping Puck. "You have to fight him," Daphne insisted. "He's too strong." A shudder ran through him, and any trace of their family friend was buried again. His disoriented temptation gave Puck another opportunity to attack. The boy climbed to his feet and picked up a large rock from the ground. He tossed it as hard as he could, striking the beast in the head. "Hey, Wolf, you ever hear of a game called dodgeball?" he asked. "Death is moments away, and you want to play games?" the wolf laughed. Puck threw the rock and hit the wolf in the chest, knocking the air out of the big brute. "The rules are hilarious," he shouted, bending over for another rock. With impossible speed, he tossed one after another at the beast. "Puck, stop!" Sabrina shouted. The boy looked over at her. His face was red with excitement, but his eyes were full of confusion. "I'm trying to save your life, Grim," the boy said. "You're gonna kill us all," Sabrina said. "You're making Rumpelstiltskin stronger." The wolf staggered to his feet. "You should be a bit more worried about me, child." "Take a look around you, Rover," Charming said, stepping between the wolf and Sabrina. "Your little tantrum is helping fuel your destruction." The wolf stood up tall and faced the mayor, who continued. The angrier you get, the stronger the real enemy becomes." Miss White joined Charming's side. She pointed at Rumpelstiltskin, who was encircled by his blue energy, enjoying each second of the fight. "He's powering himself with your anger, and when he has enough, he's going to blow up this cave and bury everyone in it, including you," Granny Relda said. "You're singing your own death certificate," Hamstead added. The wolf turned to face the little creature, and immediately the blue glow around Rumpelstiltskin expanded. "What are you up to, little man?" the beast growled. "Your rage is exquisite," Rumpelstiltskin cried. "It's the best meal I've ever tasted." "You're hungry for my anger," the wolf said. "It's fantastic," the creature said. The wolf eyed Sabrina closely. He had an odd expression on his face, filled with disgust and disbelief, one that seemed to say, "Can you believe this guy?" If Sabrina hadn't been so terrified, she might have laughed. The wolf turned on Rumpelstiltskin and lunged forward, grabbing the little creature. As soon as they collided, both were enveloped by blue energy. "Child, you have to get us out of here," Charming shouted at Sabrina. "You have to use one of the matches." Sabrina reached into her pocket and found the matchbox. Inside were the 2 matches. "Sabrina, where did you get those?" Granny Relda asked. "Charming, we need to get everyone out of here," Sabrina shouted over the fighting. She removed one and wished she were somewhere safe, and struck the match. In the flames, you could see the outside of the school. Everywhere, dirty students milled around in confusion, having just broken free from the Piper's magic. She tossed the match on the floor, and a giant flame appeared. "Everyone, through the portal!" Charming shouted. Hamlin picked up his son and stepped through the portal. Daphne and Puck rushed to Toby, and together they dragged the big spider by his legs until they were all stepping through the magical flames. Puck raced back through, transformed into a gorilla, and hoisted Bella and Natalie on his back. A moment later, they were disappearing as well. "This was terribly reckless," Charming said to Snow White as they took their turn. "I believe the word is brave," Sheriff Hamstead said. Snow White grinned and poked Charming on the side. "You could learn a thing or two from the sheriff." Granny took Sabrina by the hand. "We have to go." "We can't leave him down here," Sabrina cried as she watched the wolf and Rumpelstiltskin fighting. "I believe Mr. Candace knows what he's doing," Granny Relda said. "This is my fault." "I won't go," Sabrina insisted. "No, child, you are not responsible for this." Granny tried to reassure her, but when it didn't help, the old woman grabbed Sabrina's coat and dragged her through the portal. In a flash, they were standing outside the cold with 100 elementary school students who were staring at the gorilla carrying a big hairy girl and a frog monster. "This is going to take a lot of forgetful dust," Daphne said under her breath. "Get away from the school," Principal Hamlin shouted to the children, and they obeyed. They ran for the parking lot just as Sabrina heard a slow, horrible rumble from below. Everyone raced to the other side of the road where some children were already congregated. When she reached them, Sabrina turned and watched the school. The horror unfolded like a car crash she couldn't stop watching. First, the smoke billowed out of the school's windows. Then a terrible explosion blew out of the glass and knocked the doors off their hinges. The roof collapsed. The flame, 100 feet high, shot out of the center. And then the ground sank as the school fell in it. Finally, a cloud of dust rose up, covering the site, and when it settled again, the school was gone. Only a huge hole remained as evidence that there had been anything there at all. It was my anger and my prejudice that did this, Sabrina said, as she broke down in tears. Child, Rumpelstiltskin manipulated you, her grandmother insisted. He only manipulated what was already inside of me. There's a little ugliness in all of us, Liveling. If it hadn't been you, it would have been someone else. You can't blame yourself. Suddenly, Beauty and the Beast, the Frog Prince and Princess, and Miss Muffet and the Spider raced through the crowd of children. We heard there was trouble at the school, the Beast grunted. Have you found our kids? Puck pointed at the 3 unconscious monsters lying on the ground. The parents cried out in unison and rushed to their children. The Beast picked up his grotesque unconscious daughter, Natalie, and lifted her into the air. She's beautiful, darling, he cried to his wife. Sabrina watched the happiness in the parents' eyes. The Frog Prince and his wife kneeled down by their daughter, Bella, and slowly caressed her face. Even the spider cooed over his son, Toby. They loved their monstrous, murderous children. Sabrina reached into her pocket and pulled out her box of matches. She opened it and took out the last one of them. It would take her to her parents, no matter where they were. She couldn't be without them, not for another moment. She needed them right now. She made a wish, struck the match against the box, flinty surface, and watched the flame come to life. It shined in the cold night. Sabrina, no! Granny Relda cried. Look at what I've become, the girl said sadly. I need my mom and dad. Sabrina, you listen to me. I forbid it. It's too dangerous, Granny said, but Sabrina could already see her parents, safe and asleep on a bed inside the flame. She tossed the match to the ground, and the portal grew. Without even a glance at her grandmother or sister, she stepped into it and found herself in a dark room. Her parents were lying on a filthy mattress, sound asleep. As the roaring fire kept them warm, she rushed to their sides, embracing each as best as she could while avoiding her wounded arm. I'm going to take you home now, she said, doing her best to drag her unconscious mother from the bed and toward the portal. As she got closer, she could see Granny, Daphne, and Puck on the other side, waiting with worried faces. Suddenly, Daphne grimaced in terror and started shouting, but Sabrina couldn't hear a word. Sound didn't cross the portal. What is she trying to tell me? Did you bring me a puppy? A child's voice asked. Sabrina turned around and saw a figure step out of the shadows. She had known she might someday have to confront her parents' kidnapper, but her imagination had never prepared her for the person that now stood in front of her. It was a little girl, probably Daphne's age, wearing a red cloak and a twisted grin. Sabrina had never seen such an expression on a child's face. It was madness. Who are you? Sabrina asked. No, you didn't bring him, the little girl said angrily. But I smell him on you. Where is my puppy? The little girl reached out and put her hand on Sabrina's shirt. When she removed it, a blood-red stain remained on the handprint. I can't play house without my grandma and my puppy, the girl said. I don't know what you're talking about, Sabrina said, pulling away from the girl's grip. Yes, gibberish. That's what I speak, the little girl agreed. Not a word makes sense. That's what they said. They said I had an overactive imagination. What do you want? I want to play house. The little girl's face grew very angry, and she pointed a finger at Sabrina. I have a mommy and a daddy and a baby brother and a kitty. Do you want to pet my kitty? Just then, Sabrina heard an inhuman voice slurping and slavering behind her. It said, Jabberwocky, Jabberwocky, Jabberwocky. Over and over again. She turned to see what was making the noise, and a shriek flew out of her throat. Hunching over was something too impossible to exist, a combination of skin and scales and jagged teeth. Even in a town like Fairport Landing, Sabrina had never seen something so horrific. You are an ugly one, a voice said from across the room. The monster turned. Puck was standing next to the portal, hands on his hips, like some kind of comic book hero. Come on, Grim, I'm here to rescue you. With a hiss, the portal burned out and closed behind him. Puck looked back and grimaced. Uh-oh. The girl in red screamed with rage. I don't need a sister or another brother. I need a grandma and a puppy. Suddenly, the monster swung its enormous arm at Sabrina, and everything went black. Oh my gosh. Like, I want to read this sneak peek right now for The Problem Child Book 3. That was the end. Michael Buckley is literally must be the king of cliffhangers because he just left us on a cliffhanger. I can't wait to talk about it in class. Talk to you later. Bye.